Welcome to Galactic Nova Stories, where cosmic emotions come to life. Your journey begins now. The observation deck of the Aurora hung suspended between stars, a hollow, breathless cathedral carved out of metal and dreams. Lysara stood alone by the giant viewport, the galaxy sprawling before her like a living canvas. Swirls of violet, sapphire and fierce gold gas clouds rippled outward, illuminating the curves of her pale features and the gleam of her silver ceremonial armor. Her long white hair drifted in the subtle shift of artificial gravity, and her gaze, piercing and tired, searched the stars for something she could never name. Behind her, life bloomed, the hum of dignitaries mingling, the muted clink of glass on glass, the low rustle of elaborate robes and diplomatic sashes. Voices rose in polished diplomatic cadence, threading through the charged air. Yet to Lysara it was not the words themselves that mattered. It was their scent, the faint chemical ripple each lie left in the atmosphere. Her people had evolved this sensitivity long before they had tamed spaceflight, long before they had learned the cruelty of needing to belong. And tonight the air was heavy with lies. Every smile she glimpsed out of the corner of her eye was tinged with ambition. Every handshake stank of concealed motives. She turned her head slightly, letting her senses sharpen, narrowing in on each figure. Ambassador Coral's scent was sharp and cold, ambition barely restrained. Ambassador Ruiz's was sickly sweet, layered with guilt and self-doubt. Even the youngest attachés carried the sour fragrance of half-truths, and yet she remained silent. "Be still, Lysara," she told herself. "You are a guardian of the treaty, not its executioner." A low chime sounded, signaling the upcoming address. The gathering tightened, diplomats adjusting their stances, dignitaries flicking their ceremonial capes into place. President Marston of Terra approached the central platform, his presence a beacon of gravity among the superficial sparkle. Lysara closed her eyes briefly, drawing a slow, centering breath through her nose, absorbing every molecule around her. In a single inhalation, she knew, no one here wanted true peace. They wanted victory disguised as unity. Her hands clenched at her sides. She was so tired, so infinitely tired, of sifting through endless rivers of deceit, of standing just outside humanity's warmth, of dreaming of a touch she could trust. A flicker. The lights above dimmed, then snapped back. An uneasy murmur rippled through the assembly. Then another flicker, longer, deeper. A vibration underfoot, subtle at first, but quickly growing. Instinct surged through Lysara like a current. Her heart leapt. Something was wrong. Before the emergency. Sirens even began to wail. She was moving. She abandoned protocol without thought, her body obeying something far older than duty, an instinct for survival, for protection. The grand doors hissed open just in time for her to sprint into the corridor beyond, boots hammering against the floor, the world flashing between red emergency strobes. Down the shaftways, past startled officers and confused delegates. Toward engineering. The lower deck smelled different immediately, sharp with burning circuitry, the earthy undertone of human blood, the acrid stench of fear. She followed it, tracking the scent like a predator through twisting, half-lit corridors. A pulse hammered in her ears, not of terror, but of desperate clarity. She found him beneath a collapsed conduit, barely conscious. Jace Dre, human engineer, fighter, dreamer, and miraculously, impossibly honest. His presence struck her like a blow. No lies seeped from him. No hidden agenda stained the air around his crumpled form. Only pure, searing pain, and beneath it, unwavering courage. The moment their eyes locked, something fundamental inside her shifted. It was as if an ancient wall inside her soul cracked and splintered. Without hesitation, Lysara dropped to her knees. Her armor clanged against the deck plates, but she didn't care. She reached for him, her hands hovering for the briefest, uncertain moment. She had healed humans before, but this felt different, deliberate, sacred. He was bleeding from a jagged tear along his forearm where the metal had caught him. Every breath he took was shallow, ragged. She pulled a compact healing kit from her belt, designed for emergencies, meant for allies. She pressed the patch gently against his skin. The wound glowed blue, fibers knitting under the alien nanotech. Jace winced, but his eyes never left hers. "You came," he whispered, as if the notion amazed him. "I am not leaving you," Lysara answered, voice low, fierce. A heartbeat later, she realized she wasn't speaking only of this moment. The ship groaned around them, deep metal sounds echoing through the bowels of the deck. Another shudder trembled beneath them. Something catastrophic had been set in motion, and Lysara suspected it wasn't an accident. She dared to touch his hand, testing, light, ready to pull away if he recoiled. He didn't. Instead, he gripped, her fingers, his calloused palm, grounding her, an anchor in the chaos. She saw the questions in his eyes, the unspoken understanding passing between them like a thread woven through twin hearts. You're not like them," Jace said hoarsely. "And neither are you," she whispered back. For one long, breathless moment, nothing existed but their joined hands and the silent vow forming between them. The world outside, the war of politics, the future of their alliance, faded into meaningless ash. She had spent her life dissecting lies. And now, in the smoldering ruin of the Aurora's engineering bay, she had finally found a truth too bright to look at directly. Every great bond starts with a single moment of courage. Galactic Nova Stories is just beginning, and your support matters. If you love emotional sci-fi tales, forbidden connections, and stories that stay with you, hit subscribe. It's free, and it helps us bring more stories from the stars to you. Jace's hand tightened, grounding her to this fragile, pivotal second. "You're bleeding too," he murmured, noticing a cut on her cheek she hadn't felt. "Doesn't matter," she said, voice rougher than she intended. Another low rumble shook the ship. She helped him up slowly, feeling the tension in his body, the silent grimace as his injured arm protested. From her belt, she retrieved a small crystalline chip, the one she had activated hours earlier when she first suspected sabotage. She pressed it into his uninjured hand. Their fingers brushed again, lingering longer than necessary. "Someone did this," she said, voice like steel under velvet. "This was no system failure." Jace's jaw tightened. His human intuition met her alien certainty in a perfect collision. "Then we find them," he said, his voice low, fierce, and without hesitation. For the first time in cycles, Lysara smiled, a real smile, small and solemn. Hope, delicate and dangerous, bloomed in her chest. Together they turned toward the darkened corridor, two souls forged by pain, connected now by something far stronger than blood or oath. The dim corridors of the Aurora stretched before them, like the arteries of some wounded titan, each flickering light a failing heartbeat. Lysara kept her steps measured, but inside, her mind raced with calculations, paths through the ship's maze, probabilities of enemy ambushes, the hidden motives, seeping through the hull like a slow poison. Beside her, Jace moved with a surprising steadiness. Though he was still favoring his injured arm, there was a determined tension in his body, a quiet refusal to let pain slow him down. She found herself glancing at him more often than she needed to, cataloguing every grimace, every tightened breath. Protectiveness stirred in her, alien and unfamiliar, wrapping around her core like a vine. They moved in silence for a time, save for the low warble of distant alarms and the occasional groan of stressed metal. Their only companions were the shadows stretching along the corridor walls, dark and shifting. Lysara's senses were tuned to the ship, to the way the air moved, to the smallest disturbances. She inhaled deeply, seeking not only the scent of betrayal, but now something else, the markers of whoever had done this. "You're scanning, aren't you?" Jace asked quietly, breaking the silence. His voice was warm, roughened by pain, but filled with a wry, almost teasing curiosity. She tilted her head slightly. "In a way, I listen differently than you do." He smiled at that, small, genuine. "I figured. You're reading the room without a console." His simple understanding caught her off guard. Most humans either romanticized or feared her abilities. Jace just accepted them, accepted her. The lift bay was ahead, sealed. Lysara placed her palm against the access panel. A surge of foreign, oily energy met her touch, and she snatched her hand back instinctively. "Tampered," she said grimly. "Can you open it?" Jace asked. She shook her head. "Not without triggering a lockdown. Someone wants this route sealed, and fast." Without hesitation, Jace turned, scanning the corridor. His mind worked quickly. Practical, mechanical. Secondary access. Shafts. If they're following standard Terra Nova regulations, there should be a maintenance crawlspace 2 decks down. She studied him for a moment longer, appreciating the way his mind adapted under pressure. Not frozen by fear, but forged by it. "Lead the way," she said softly. They doubled back through narrow maintenance corridors, Lysara moving close behind him. The proximity did strange things to her senses. The steady beat of his heart, the warmth radiating from his body, even the subtle shift of his breath in the cool air. She found herself aligning her pace to his, her presence a silent shield at his back. At a junction, Jace slowed, turning to face her. His brow was furrowed, tension carved into his face. "Why would someone sabotage the engines during peace negotiations?" he asked. His voice was a low murmur, pitched for her ears alone. "This ship is carrying ambassadors from 15 worlds. It's practically a floating declaration of unity." Lysara considered her words carefully. "Because unity threatens those who profit from division." She let the truth hang heavy between them. Jace exhaled slowly, the truth settling into his bones. "War is good business. For some," she confirmed, "not for those who bleed." They reached the maintenance hatch, secured by manual bolts. Jace knelt, working the release with his good hand. Lysara crouched beside him, scanning the corridor with her heightened senses. The air shifted. A breath. A ripple. Without thinking, she grabbed Jace's shoulder and yanked him back just as a sharp crack split the air. A projectile, primitive, chemical-driven, embedded itself in the wall where his head had been. Gunfire. On the Aurora. Unthinkable. They pressed close to the bulkhead, breathless. For a moment, Lysara felt his heartbeat against her side, wild and fast, matching her own. "You saved my life," he whispered. "You saved mine first," she replied without hesitation. Another shot rang out, ricocheting off a metal panel near their feet. Jace cursed under his breath. "We can't stay exposed." He jammed the last bolt free and shoved the hatch open. Lysara ducked in first, twisting in the narrow space to offer her hand. He took it without pause, their fingers intertwining for a moment longer than necessary. Inside the crawl space, the world compressed. Tight walls, the smell of metal and lubricant, the sound of their own shallow breathing. Lysara led the way, feeling the ship's pulse through her fingertips on the narrow handholds. Jace followed closely, their knees brushing, their bodies moving in a precarious, delicate rhythm. As they crawled through the darkness, flashes of memory hit Lysara, moments from her youth when she had believed in heroes, before betrayal had burned that belief from her veins. Now beside her was a man who didn't even know he was becoming one. The crawl space opened into a small service bay. Lysara slid out first, rolling to her feet, scanning the area. Clear for now, Jace followed, grunting as he stood, wincing from the effort. Lysara stepped closer, lifting his injured arm gently, assessing the work she'd done earlier. His breath caught as her fingers brushed his skin. "You should rest," she murmured. "Not until we find whoever did this," he said, stubborn but grateful. A sudden hum filled the space, a low, resonant vibration. Both of them turned instinctively. A holographic panel buzzed to life nearby, lines of encrypted code streaming across it. Lysara frowned. "That's a trace beacon. Whoever sabotaged the ship, they're still here, and they're tracking movements." Jace stepped closer, his shoulder brushing hers. "Then we're not just hunting them," he said grimly. "They're hunting us too." Lysara turned to him fully, their faces only inches apart. In the dim blue light, his eyes were dark pools of stubborn hope. "Then we stay together," she said. For the first time since the alarms began, Jace smiled. A real, aching, boyish smile that cracked through all her careful armor. "Together," he agreed, voice rough, sure. The word wrapped around her heart like a promise and a warning. and somewhere deep in the ship's labyrinth, something waited. Watching, the truth, raw and terrible, was only just beginning to reveal itself. The corridors beyond the service bay narrowed even further, forcing Jace and Lysara to move in tense, measured strides. Emergency lights pulsed in sickly shades of red and amber, throwing their shadows onto the walls. Two blurred figures stitched together by urgency and fate. Lysara felt every beat of the ship beneath her boots, every flicker of its wounded systems, crying out. Somewhere deeper within Aurora's heart, critical systems were failing. She knew the pattern. The sabotage had been precise, ruthless, designed not for immediate destruction, but for slow, undeniable collapse. A sinking ship amid a sea of diplomacy, a massacre disguised as an accident. They couldn't let that happen. Not tonight. Jace slowed at a junction, frowning as he studied the emergency schematics displayed on a cracked wall panel. Lines of code crawled across the screen, some legitimate, some corrupted beyond recognition. "This isn't random," he muttered. "They knew exactly where to hit us." His finger traced the map, halting over a highlighted sector. Auxiliary command. If they disable it completely, there's no way to reroute navigation. We'll drift straight into the orbital debris field over Lyra Station. "Crushing us like insects," Lysara said softly, the bitterness seeping through her usually calm tone. Jace glanced at her, his jaw tightening. "We can't let that happen." She met his gaze, holding it steady. "We won't." The weight of the unspoken hung between them, not just the survival of the ship, but of something infinitely rarer. Trust. In a universe built on betrayal and compromise, here in the narrow arteries of a dying vessel, something different sparked, something precious. They pushed forward. At a sealed hatchway leading into auxiliary command, Lysara gestured for Jace to hang back. She knelt low, flattening her palm against the metal. Her senses opened like a flower under a hidden sun, feeling vibrations, warmth, faint electrostatic charges. She closed her eyes, tuning herself to the heartbeat of the room beyond. Two figures, armed, nervous, one pacing, one steady, neither human. The scent drifted faintly through the airlock seal, metallic, sharp, threaded with the chemical markers of genetically engineered mercenaries. "They're not from any delegation aboard the Aurora," she whispered. "Ghostborn." Jace tensed. He'd heard the stories, even if he hadn't seen one before. Lab-forged soldiers, loyalty bought with currency, and pain, used for missions no government would ever officially sanction. "Can we take them?" he asked quietly, his voice a mix of fear and faith. Lysara allowed herself a tiny smile. "Stay behind me." The hatch wasn't locked. These saboteurs thought no one would make it this far. With a precise motion, she triggered the manual release, catching the door as it slid back soundlessly. She moved like a phantom, silent, lethal. The first mercenary never saw her coming. With a fluid strike, she drove her elbow into his throat, catching his weapon as it fell from limp fingers. His body crumpled without a sound. The second spun too late. Jace, to his own surprise, acted without thinking, grabbing a fallen wrench and hurling it with all the strength he could muster. It cracked against the mercenary's forearm, sending his blaster clattering away. Lysara closed the distance in a blink. One disabling blow to the knee, another to the temple. The mercenary dropped. For a moment only their breathing filled the room, sharp, shallow, electric with adrenaline. Jace stared at the downed figures, chest heaving. "I didn't think that would actually work," he muttered. "You have good instincts," Lysara said, allowing herself a flicker of approval. "And bad aim." That earned a short, breathless laugh from him, a sound that warmed something in her chest she hadn't felt in years. They moved to the command console, Lysara quickly scanning the encrypted files, while Jace initiated a systems reset, his fingers flying over the battered controls. "What are you seeing?" he asked, glancing over. She hesitated, the implications of the files clawing at her gut. This wasn't just sabotage. It's a coup, coordinated attacks, here and on allied colonies across the outer systems. Aurora was meant to be the first domino. Jace swore under his breath. "We have to warn them, everyone, the council, the delegates." "No," Lysara said sharply, cutting him off. If we send a wide broadcast now, we expose ourselves. We give whoever's still moving against us a chance to silence us before the truth can spread. Jace looked at her, torn. Then what do we do? She met his eyes, steady and unwavering. We find the proof. We survive long enough to reveal it. As if summoned by her words, the lights around them dimmed again, and a slow, rhythmic pounding began in the distance. Heavy footsteps, reinforcements. We're out of time, Jace said. Lysara handed him a slim, crystalline drive, a portable data shard. Take this. Hide. If they catch one of us, the other has to get this to the surface. He stared at her, horror dawning. I'm not leaving you. You might have to, she said, voice a whisper of steel. The truth is bigger than either of us. But even as she said it, her hand lingered against his, fingers trembling with the weight of the choice she was asking him to make. The thought of separating from him now, after everything, carved something raw and bleeding inside her chest. Their eyes locked, an unspoken war raging between duty and longing, between survival and connection. I won't let you die, Jace said fiercely. Not for this. Not for them. And I won't let you fall, she answered. The pounding footsteps grew louder. No more time. They turned toward the maintenance hatch again, escaping into the labyrinth of the ship. The drive clutched between them like a fragile heart. Together, they ran into darkness, into danger, into the unknown. Not as strangers anymore, not as enemies, but something infinitely more dangerous. Two souls, bound by a truth too pure to lie. The ship's arteries seemed to close in around them, walls trembling under the force of distant impacts. Somewhere in Aurora's wounded body, systems failed in bright bursts of light and sparks. Lysara led Jace through the chaos, each turn, a calculated gamble. She knew the ship's design better than most, but the saboteurs had rewritten the rules. They slipped through collapsing service tunnels, emergency barriers dropping behind them like guillotines. Breathless, bruised, and running on the thin edge of survival, they reached the grav displacement maintenance ring, an enormous open-air chamber where the artificial gravity generators spun in low, humming loops. The generators still worked, for now, but Lysara could feel it, a terrible wrongness pulsing from the heart of the machinery, like a fevered heartbeat before collapse. Jace leaned heavily against a support column, sweat slicking his brow, his injured arm cradled protectively. Against his side, Lysara crossed to him without hesitation, her hands ghosting over his body, not touching where it hurt, but steadying him where she could. He looked up at her, his eyes raw with pain and something deeper. You should leave me, he rasped. I'm slowing you down. Her jaw tightened, not in anger but in fierce, bone-deep refusal. I don't leave my bondmates behind, she said. The word slipped out before she could catch it. Bondmates. A word sacred in her people's language. A word that had once been forbidden to even think after what had been taken from her. Jace's eyes widened slightly, but he didn't mock it, didn't question it. Instead, he asked almost reverently, "What does that mean?" Lysara looked away, unable to meet the tenderness in his gaze. Her voice dropped to a whisper. It means more than survival. It means trust when logic says not. Too, it means standing between death and another soul, even when you are afraid. She didn't say especially when you are afraid, but he heard it anyway. Jace straightened, drawing strength not from bravado, but from that single fragile connection between them. Then you're stuck with me, he said, offering a ghost of a smile. Bondmates. The word sounded clumsy on his tongue, but it lit something fierce and aching inside her. Before she could answer, a cold ripple swept through the air. Lysara's senses prickled. Danger, immediate and close. From the darkness beyond the generator rings, a new threat emerged. Not soldiers this time, not men, but the hunters, autonomous death machines, all blade and cold logic, programmed to track and eliminate anomalies. Jace stiffened at the sight. Lysara could feel his pulse quicken, feel the primal terror that machines like this awakened in even the bravest hearts. Run? He asked, half joking, half serious. They track motion and heat, Signatures, Lysara said quickly, her mind already mapping their odds. Running makes us easy prey. The first hunter's sensors clicked, locking onto them. No more time. Lysara grabbed Jace's hand, squeezing once, "Trust me," then yanked him behind the nearest generator coil. The heavy hum of the machinery masked their breathing, but the hunters were methodical, relentless. They would find them. It was only a matter of time. Jace's hand tightened around hers. She realized he was trembling, but he was holding steady. Holding onto her, 1,000 strategies raced through her mind, none of them survivable without unacceptable risk, unless she did the unthinkable. "I can mask us," she whispered urgently. "I can suppress our biosignatures. But it's dangerous. How dangerous? I have to anchor my mind to yours, merge us for a moment. If either of us loses focus—" She didn't finish. The consequences didn't need words. Jace didn't hesitate. His free hand rose, brushing a strand of silver hair from her face with infinite care. His touch was reverent, fearless. "I trust you," he said simply. For a heartbeat, Lysara closed her eyes, letting the confession sink deep into her fractured soul. No lies, no masks, only truth. She reached up, cupping his face between her palms. Their foreheads touched, human and alien, and the world fell away. It was not gentle. It was not painless. The bond slammed open like a star going nova, thoughts, memories, sensations cascading between them. She saw flashes of his life, scraps of lonely childhood nights, staring at distant stars, the ache of losing comrades he couldn't save, the hollow burn of believing he wasn't enough. He saw her too, grief she had buried, betrayals layered like scars, the brutal discipline of a life spent surviving without tenderness. No walls, no pretense, just two souls bared and broken, and beautiful. The hunters swept past them, their senses blind to the human and alien holding each other in the dark, shielded by nothing but the raw, violent honesty of their connection. When the last echo of mechanical footsteps faded, Lysara pulled back, gasping, her body shaking with the strain. Jace steadied her without thinking, wrapping his arms around her. For a moment, they clung to each other, not as fugitives, not as warriors, but simply as people. "You're incredible," he whispered against her hair. "You're reckless," she whispered back, but her voice was thick with something that almost sounded like hope. They pulled apart slowly, reluctant to let the moment die. "We need to move," Lysara said, forcing herself to refocus. "There's an emergency shuttle dock ahead. If we reach it before the next sweep, we can get to the surface, expose everything." "And after that?" Jace asked, searching her face for something she wasn't ready to promise. Her heart ached. "After that, we survive." But in her mind, in the bond still faintly shimmering between them, another silent vow formed. "After that, we find a way to live." Hand in hand, they moved toward the shuttle docks, toward betrayal and danger, and the sliver of salvation that waited beyond. And though neither dared say it aloud, both knew something had already changed between them. Something that no machine, no bullet, no betrayal could erase. The truth was no longer a weapon to fear. It was the fragile, priceless bridge that would save them both, or break them forever. The shuttle dock loomed ahead, bathed in the eerie glow of emergency lights. It was a hallowed, sacred space, seemingly untouched by the chaos that had torn through the rest of the ship. But Lysara knew better. Even in the dim light, she could sense the underlying tension, air thick with danger, with the pulse of impending doom. They were close, too close. Every step they took seemed to echo louder in the hollow expanse. Jace's breath was uneven, his injured arm wrapped tightly against his chest, but he moved with quiet determination. His gaze was steady on her, his trust unwavering. It was almost too much for her, this human with his broken past, his willingness to fight for something bigger than himself. Her heart stumbled as she caught herself thinking it. His. As if there were any possessiveness left in her soul, she buried the thought. Focus, only focus. They reached the shuttle, the door silently hissing open to reveal the dim cockpit inside. Lysara stepped in first, quickly pulling up the control panel. She was already halfway through a command sequence when Jace followed, pausing in the doorway. His eyes flicked over her, lingering a moment too long, before he spoke. "Do you think we'll make it?" She didn't look up. Her fingers flew over the interface, locking them in, bypassing security protocols. "Yes." His footsteps were quiet, but the weight of his presence seemed to fill the small cabin. She felt him approach. His heat radiating behind her, and for a split second it felt like the world stopped just for them. "You don't sound so sure," he said, his voice soft but edged with the quiet vulnerability he only let slip in moments like this. Lysara paused, her hand hovering over the console, and she closed her eyes. She wasn't lying when she said yes. But why? Why was she willing to bet everything on this fragile moment when all the odds were stacked against them? "I never doubted us," she whispered. There was something in the way she said it, an unspoken promise embedded in her words. His breath hitched slightly, and for a moment she felt a tremor in his body. A shared fear, a shared connection too raw to hide. She turned to face him, their gazes locking, and in his eyes she saw something she didn't expect. Hope. Quiet. Fragile hope, fragile as the ship's systems, ready to collapse under the pressure of a broken galaxy. But it was hope nonetheless. And then the sound came, loud, unmistakable. The sharp crack of a blaster shot, followed by the deep, haunting hum of approaching enemies. "We're not alone," she said, voice tight with urgency. Jace didn't flinch. He moved to the back of the shuttle, grabbing the emergency weapons cache with steady hands. Lysara didn't hesitate to move alongside him, but her mind was already turning, already calculating. Whoever had reached the shuttle dock first had an advantage, but it wasn't the advantage they thought. Lysara shoved her hand into the console, pulling up a digital map of the station's immediate vicinity. It wasn't much, but it was enough to know one thing. Someone had betrayed them. "We're walking into a trap," she said softly, almost to herself. Jace's eyes met hers, and for the first time since the chaos began, he looked truly scared. Not for his own life, but for hers, and something in her chest twisted painfully. "I'm not letting them take you," he said, voice fierce. "You're not doing this alone." Lysara's pulse hammered in her ears. She didn't want to admit it, didn't want to acknowledge that for the first time in years there was someone she couldn't lose. But she knew. She had known it since the first time their hands had brushed, since the first time he had stood beside her, unwavering. "We fight together," she said simply, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. "And if we die as one." Jace's response was a small, strained smile. The kind of smile that said everything. "I'm with you, whatever happens." But then the shuttle door slid open with a sharp hiss, and everything shifted. Figures emerged from the shadows, more ghost-born mercenaries, their forms cloaked in battle armor, moving like machines trained for this moment. But in the lead was a face Lysara recognized, a face she had seen too many times in her past. A former ally, now turned traitor. Virek. The name was like poison in her mouth. He had been her friend, her confidant, until one day he hadn't been. Until one day he had sold her out for credits. "End of the line," Virek said with a sneer, stepping forward. "You should have known better than to trust someone like me." Lysara's hands clenched into fists at her sides, but she didn't flinch. She didn't back down. "Your betrayal won't save you," she said coldly. "And it won't save this ship." "Is that so?" Virek's lips curled in a twisted grin. "Let's see how much you can save when the Aurora drifts into the debris field, and the last thing your precious council ever hears is the sound of your desperate plea." Lysara's heart thundered in her chest. She could feel the weight of Jace's presence beside her, unwavering, ready to fight. But it was her turn now. Her turn to stop this madness, to end it once and for all. In a single fluid motion, she activated the shuttle's thrusters. The engines roared to life, the heat from the engines flickering in the dim light. "Jace," she said, her voice low but filled with determination, "get us out of here." Without hesitation, he pulled the controls, steering them away from the trap. But as the shuttle lifted off, She knew one thing beyond all else. It wasn't just the ship that was in danger. The truth they carried with them was a time bomb, ticking louder with each passing second. Someone would have to pay for this betrayal. Someone would have to make the ultimate sacrifice to reveal the truth and save those they loved, and maybe it would be them. But as the shuttle shot into the stars, the cold expanse stretching infinitely before them, Lysara dared to hope. Dared to believe that for once the cost of truth was worth the price of survival. If this story moved you, share it with someone who loves powerful tales from distant worlds. Don't forget to like and let us know in the comments, what would you have done?